some sort of list, I suppose, because I am getting, oh, we're live on YouTube, but some very odd spam on my phone. So, well, we still don't have a quorum. Sort of list, I suppose. Heard myself back on audio feedback, but we still don't have a quorum, so we'll just.
That was just YouTube getting started. That's all.
Oh, okay. We'll still give it a couple of minutes.
There's our quorum, Lauren. Coming in right now.
So while we're waiting for Katie to get finished hooked up, did everybody have a good week last week? Okay. No.
The snow made Steve's life HC double hockey sticks, I'm sure.
Rick and I did not have a lot of fun last week. No. More so. I'm glad to see all the snow melt and for things to get a little bit quiet, and Rick is, and Scott is, and Dan, and the whole team that really stepped up. So yeah, hopefully we won't see any more of that the rest of this year.
Hard to say in St. Louis. And with that, I will call the meeting to order. It's January 26th. It's a Tuesday, and Economic Development. Thank you for attending on Zoom, but also if you're watching on YouTube. So, Mrs. Patrick, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Chair Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Here.
Councilmember Galani. Councilmember McCune. Councilmember Nyhan. Councilmember Jaxie.
Here.
Roll call complete.
Do we have any corrections to the minutes as posted? Councilmember Clark?
This is just no, I'm sorry. I had something written down and it was wrong.
Okay, that's okay. I will entertain a motion then to approve the minutes. Made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. All those in favor, please vote aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Do we have anyone here from the public that would like to comment?
No, we do not. There are no members of the public on tonight.
Okay, with that, we'll roll right along. And just a reminder that we do have back-to-back meetings with Planning and Parks, so we'll try to get everybody out here on time, if not a little bit early, for restroom breaks and a dinner break. So, Mr. Jacqueline, would you like to introduce our 3 ready for action items, starting with the Visit for Wildwood Tourism campaign update, please?
Sure, I sure will. Thank you, Chair Edens, members of the committee. Presented for everybody tonight an update from last month's meeting. We had at the January meeting presented a draft printed piece of a new tourism flyer and a draft landing page on the city website for the new tourism campaign. At the last meeting, the committee went through both items, made some recommended changes to specific edits to the flyer as well as to the website, different things to change, some new items to add. So I compiled the list of the major changes that were recommended by this committee and provided them to you all as a memo on the front page of this report for everybody's review, identifying the different changes that were recommended both for the printed piece and the website. We have taken the time to go through and make as many of those edits as possible to each of those 2 items for both the printed piece and the flyer. I included with the report today a copy of a updated printed piece reflecting many of the changes that were recommended by the committee. I'm not going to go into too much detail of each of them. We did replace the main photo at the top. We also included a new backside of the flyer that was recommended with kind of a collage of photos from the city instead of just one. On that same back page, we also included links to the city's Parks and Recreation app that includes all the information about the city's parks and trails and special events that you can scan by QR code or search in the App Store for each of those. We reorganized the list of shops instead of alphabetically to be now listed by street name and street number. We also expanded on a couple of the items just to provide some additional information specific to what the committee requested. On the website, as I noted in the memo, we made 7 different changes as well, identifying some new text in the overall summary about the city. We linked to some additional new information, both with the points of interest map provided by the HPC, city's parks and trails map, as well as identifying Gork as a resource for additional information on mountain biking. One comment that Director Vunish mentioned, linking to the campground in Eureka as well for camping options. And then the last one I mentioned on our website was something that we kind of finished the discussion with in January was if there's a possibility to, instead of just having the tourism website as a drop down under a submenu, creating more of a permanent button or permanent menu for it on the homepage. Mm-hmm. And I did speak with Civic Plus about that and got an answer back. The short answer is yes, there is a way to do it. The longer answer is that it might be a little bit difficult and might cost us some money. Largely because the homepage was built by Civic Plus during our redesign 3 years ago. There are some permanent buttons on the homepage that were built by Civic Plus. There are nothing that we directly currently have the ability to modify. If we'd like to add some, Civic Plus would have to be engaged to design the button and add that button to the main page. We would just need to make sure, A, that the website can handle that many buttons width across the screen. And then they'd have to figure out what the cost would be to add those. We could either make it as a fixed button on the front homepage, or we can make it as a new menu on the top mega menu. But either way, to create that additional button, they said there would be some time on Civic Plus's end to create the graphics and update the website to include it. I did not choose to go further into detail with Civic Plus as far as time or cost to do so. I just want to give you all an update that we did speak with them, and they told us that there is a way to do so, but it will take some time and some cost. So with that, there are several changes that were made to both the flyer piece and the website. The committee asked that we make these specific changes and bring them back to the committee for review. I believe at the last meeting, you all did at least approve this concept in draft form and allow us to begin distributing it. So I don't believe there's necessarily any required action that's necessary on behalf of the committee tonight, other than to provide additional feedback and let us know if there's any other changes that you all like to see. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I would certainly be interested in knowing exactly how much it would cost. Would like to see what the rest of the council feels about it. We created a great veterans resource page, and I believe it's also really hard to find. And when we do good work, we want to make sure that the public knows that we do good work. I have Katie on the list, and then followed by Mr. Cross and Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Chairwoman Edens. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling through my words here. Just a quick question, Julian. On the back page with all these great photos on here, is there any way we could splash across Visit Wildwood or you know, some kind of a hashtag set of text that we can have people use to get to our visitors' website more quickly?
Sure. Yeah, I think we can definitely add something on the backside.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking across a couple of the pictures, maybe in an angle, so it's just kind of pops a little bit.
Yeah, and one thing I'm thinking
Smaller.
of now, looking at this back page, I considered doing when I created it, but just for whatever reason didn't add to the final product, is just some captions on each photo to maybe identify what each location is.
That's a good
You know,
idea too.
The tourism piece, it'd be important to show what these items actually are.
Yeah. That would let visitors know that this is the kind of activities that can go on throughout the city. So,
Right, if you're all done, then City Administrator Price.
Thank you, Chair Edens. I just wanted to say to the committee, to Chair Edens for her leadership, for the committee, for the work that you all did, and to Julian, who did all the heavy lifting. This is one impressive document. And I compliment all of you for pulling this together. When I look at this and the pictures, it makes you proud to be in Wildwood, and you all pulling this together with Lauren, with your leadership, and all of you pulling together, and then Julian with his skill set. You guys did a fantastic job, and I'm pleased the way this turned out. You all did a great job, and I just wanted to compliment you on the work that you did. Thank you.
Really appreciate that, and I'm very proud of this committee and the folks I get to work with. Councilmember Clark.
I'm going to pass because it's already been talked about.
Okay, anybody else have any other comments? Oh, Director Vunich.
Thank you, ma'am. My comment relates to the collage of photographs. And when I looked at the collage of photographs, all of a sudden, it just kind of dawned on me that Wildwood's a city for all seasons, because we have the winter image of Hidden Valley. We could probably find a bridge picture for the fall. We have summer pictures. And I was wondering if we could do maybe like a little tagline, something like a city for all seasons or something as part of the tourism campaign. So that was just the thought I had. Thank you, ma'am.
That's a great idea. Unfortunately, the state of West Virginia is still wild and wonderful, which would have been a nice play on words with Wildwood. So they beat us to that many
Sure
years
would
ago.
have.
So maybe there's another way to work wild in as well. And great thought. I mean, we certainly now have some holiday lights that we could include in there as well, or an old picture with Santa. So I think that would be great for Mr. Jacqueline to take under advisement. Anybody else? And I will say too, I'm pretty excited. I mean, there's some smaller towns, even Salem, Missouri has a Visit Salem website. I know because I looked recently. So people do look at these things. Seeing no further discussion. Oh, actually, I don't think we really require a formal motion, but once Mr. Jacqueline makes some final changes, I would love for this to be, it was sent to council for work session before when we were working on it. It would be nice to formally send this to other committees. I would love for HPC to see that we are featuring the work that they have done in the past. I would love the Parks Committee, so it would be nice if we maybe put just like a little memo in front of that. So does Councilmember Dodwell?
I was just going to recommend that a copy of it go to the Town Center Update Committee too, just since those are individuals that are very interested in how we're promoting Wildwood.
Great idea. So we've got TCUT, HBC, Parks, and Planning. Any other group? Maybe the Community and Engagement Committee as well. Okay. And then I'm sure it'll go back on the next work session as well. Okay, seeing no further discussion, thank you for adding that, Councilmember Dodwell. Let's go on to the Economic Development Guide. Mr. Jacqueline, please do the introduction.
You got it. Thanks, Chair Edens, members of the committee. At the last meeting in January, we began the discussion of updating the city's Economic Development Guide for 2021. We discussed this in great detail at the last meeting, so I'll spare you that detail this time. To keep it short, the document was developed with a 5-year structure. 2021 is the 5th year. So the guide recommended that we do a complete update of this document throughout this year. So we want to begin that process at that last meeting. At last month's meeting, we discussed generally the framework of how that update may be completed. I was looking for certain input from you all as to the specific process, steps to go through to complete that update, what types of information might be included. And the committee relayed back to us that we should come back as staff to come back to this meeting with our idea of what a potential framework would look like for the update, what types of chapters and elements we believe as the professionals should go into the update. And then you all as a committee can review that and see if you concur or if you'd like to make any changes. The other piece that was brought up at the last meeting in January was looking for a potential schedule of how this update may be completed throughout this year, throughout the rest of 2021, recognizing that there are several different time-sensitive items that will be coming up over the next few months, namely the city council election in April, the current strategic planning process the city council is going through, the release of 2020 census data, and just a few different pieces that will definitely impact the content, certainly within the guide, but also the timing of how the update to the guide is completed. So receiving that feedback at the last meeting, we provided this report back to the committee tonight for your review. Within the report, on the first page, it includes that recommended initial framework for this update to the guide. Looking at the initial 6 chapters that were included in the original document in 2016, we all kind of agreed at the last meeting in January that we don't necessarily need to follow that same structure. That structure was developed intentionally to create this program. Now that the program has been created, our goal with this update is to give more of a status check of where we are today, what have we done so far, and where are we going now. And so we intentionally wrote the initial framework not to mirror the past document from 2016, but now to create a new framework for what we believe would be important to see in today's document. And I'm not going to read every item within this list. Hopefully you all have had a chance to look through it. Just the main categories, and we did identify 6 different elements. And some of these do correspond to the 2016 guide, but each of them I think are very important for 2021. Within the introduction, which is mainly a status check of what's changed between 2016 and 2021, from the business community, the impressions of the city from the development community, the business climate, what has changed from a 5,000-foot level about the city. Next is changes to census market data. Once we actually have new data from the 2020 census, and when we have the ability to extract that data and use it for our market to show what that has done to the different retail and office needs for our region, we will be using that to show current analytics and statistics for demographic and socioeconomic data. Number 3, status of goals from the 2016 guide. The last document did include an overarching set of goals and objectives for this city to follow to develop this program. So we want to give an update of where we are in each of those goals now that we're 5 years in. And also within that item, I think it was important to include the results of the recent town center update. Knowing that we only do that every 10 years, how have the recommendations made by TCUT now in the hands of P&Z, how do those recommended changes impact the guide? How does that impact what we are all doing as the committee to implement this program? Including the new set of goals and objectives from the city council, and also within that status of goals, the impacts of COVID. I think you can't have any kind of update for the last 5 years without talking about COVID and its impact on business in Wildwood. So we definitely want to include a pretty significant component within that document of how we have adjusted and approached COVID as a Wildwood business community. Number 4, community outreach. As we discussed at the last meeting, there's not necessarily a consensus to do any kind of a citywide survey for a citywide public input process. There is definite interest from the committee to do some type of a virtual component with a set of stakeholders. When the initial guide was developed 5 years ago, there was a group of about 25 stakeholders that really represented the public. It was residents, business owners, property owners, developers. So I believe with the committee's recommendation at the last meeting to continue to include some type of a stakeholder input in this process, that would be included in the community outreach. And I believe one item that Councilmember Galani mentioned at the last meeting was doing a virtual roundtable with this committee, maybe later on in the process, so that once we as a committee have begun assembling our goals and our path forward for this guide, presenting that in a public forum, virtually as a roundtable, where we do invite members of the public to join in and provide comment, it might be a little bit easier to control that than in an open session, I would believe. Number 5, action plan, developing a new set of action goals and objectives for the next initially 5-year review, but potentially 10 years for the full life of this document. And then just so we can all have an easier handheld document, a matrix similar to the one that was included in 2016 that just shows all the different steps that we'd like to take in the next 5-10 years, broken down by specific goals and objectives as well. This was per the instruction at the last meeting, our take on what you all wanted to see from us as the professionals, quote unquote, of what you would all believe the initial framework should be for our approach to the 2021 guide. Before I go into the potential schedule for completion, which is a little bit overwhelming, I want to break and give everybody a chance to at least talk about the framework a little bit first.
Questions? Councilmember Dodwell and then Councilmember Clark.
I just really think that this is a great breakdown of the various framework components that we need to have in this. Having reviewed the Housel-Levine document, this appears to me just off the bat much more detailed and much more professionally thought out than what we got from Housel-Levine, which was essentially just the kind of the census information, in my opinion, with a few thoughts on things that we could do. I think now that we've had an individual dedicated to this for 5 years now, 4 years, I really appreciate the additional input and perspective that this document will provide. And I also like the idea of doing a community outreach, which we did not do, I don't think, the last time. Mr. Bertolino, you may know if we did or not, but I like the idea of being able to gather a specific group of individuals with some direction versus just leaving it wide open to what do you think we ought to do. I think if we share this framework with them and our top goals, and then see whether or not they need any adjustment from the business stakeholders, the community stakeholders, and our residents. Just very good job. Thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, as I'm looking at this, I see so many different entities involved. Just you've got different commissions, different groups of people inside and outside of the city. And I was wondering, would it be appropriate to have some kind of a communication plan in this, a flow chart of how we're going to communicate the information to all these different places that we're talking about? Julian?
Yeah, I didn't know if that was pointed towards me or not. Definitely, I believe so. I think that the process will not be successful without a consistent level of transparency. So I think for our benefit, it'll be good to have an extensive level of record keeping, both internal so we can follow along our own process, but also for all those groups that we're working with, whether it's just looking in front of me, TCUT or the different stakeholder groups or whomever that might be, so that they have something to follow along to recognize where we are in the review process, but how their input is incorporated into the final document. Text on a page is always important, but I think graphics and different types of, I wouldn't call them charts, but flow charts are always even more helpful to help the reader and the person involved in the process better understand what they're doing.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I have a couple. One is like to add some homework for the committee that doesn't necessarily belong in our printed guide, but I think needs to become part of the discussion. And one is the acknowledgement of greater external threats potential. You know, we don't exist in a vacuum as a city, and certainly there are metrics that are already included that show the greater statistical area, including St. Louis. But you know, it wasn't that long ago we had a discussion about merging with St. Louis City, and the reality is, as we're trying to attract businesses, and we've talked about this. You know, I know Councilmember Dodwell is passionate about what if we had an incubator or more of a smaller technology company move in. These other cities that we're in a county with, and St. Louis City, their reputation and their resources affect who wants to come and settle here. And so we need to have an understanding, and we need to be reading as committee members other studies and guides that those communities have put together. I believe it was Centene recently that put together a list for St. Louis City and said, here's the reasons why we don't want to expand here and move future employees here. And St. Louis City was not very happy. Do I think we should read it? Yes. You know, we are within commuting distance of St. Charles. A lot of my Ward 2 residents live on the Chesterfield border. They shop in Chesterfield border. Certainly the decisions that that council makes affect Wildwood. So, you know, I do realize again that the guide will have some of that data, but I'm actually asking for additional material to be provided that we need to read and absorb on our own over the course of the next couple of meetings. And certainly, if we get it early and not, you know, a couple of days before the committee, we can send things out so that people have time to read and digest. The other thing too is I would love for this to include a shift share, because you know, prior to the pandemic, and really since the 1970s, as industry declined, most employers in the area, in successful areas were hospitality and healthcare were the two biggest regional employers. And I'm just interested to know more about how that changes in a pandemic world. As certainly, I would imagine the hospitality employment changed, and you would assume healthcare would go up, but there were certainly many of layoffs for non-essential types of healthcare services that were provided. So when we understand, it's the North American Industrial Classification System that's used for that, and you look at changes in time about how those sectors are doing. So I would love to see that included, and those are my comments. So, Mr. Jacqueline, I'll let you take back over unless somebody else has anything, we'll take back over for discussion.
Well, I think it would be helpful if we had a couple of those studies to read over before our next meeting, like a couple of weeks ahead of time. And we look at maybe identifying some of our threats first. And Julian, tell me if you think that's part of what you were thinking about doing as we progress through this. Do we need to identify our threats first so that we look at what we do have to offer with a better informed perspective on how we promote and advertise things?
I believe that the threats or challenges would definitely be part of that initial introduction of the changes to our business climate over these last few years. I think, just speaking honestly, I think there was too much negative in the last guide in 2016.
Yeah.
The Housing Levine did a great job with the rest of the document, but as a marketing piece taking into meetings, it's not much of a leave behind when the document talks all about the negative and not as much about the positive. So without going that far, I believe there's definite opportunity in that introduction, at the very least, to talk about some of our challenges and some of our threats, and maybe use that to kind of segue into our goals and why we're approaching certain items the way that we are.
Another
Sounds like a
thought
plan.
would be if we ever had to produce a separate document that contained that, that wasn't used as part of the marketing content.
Yeah, that may come in handy if we are filing for a grant or something. It's the reason that we need particular grant funding for an activity or a resource that we want to improve upon. If we identify a weakness or a threat, that would help exacerbate. That might be helpful information for a city as a whole.
The internet at the top of the list, Director Greenwich.
Yes.
Thank you again, ma'am. And this is a question for Julian. In the environment, we have watersheds, so we define an area by common characteristics, the ridge lines that send everything to the center. Is there such a thing for shopping areas? Like, how do we know, how far does the Chesterfield Valley reach out, and how far does the Walmart Center and Eureka reach out? Are there such a things like shopping sheds, so to speak?
They're not called shopping sheds, but
They are now.
right. The normal term is just the market area or the trade area, and that's really based off average driving time for a consumer. So there are some services out there like Nielsen, Claritas that do map those for you. Some communities, in my experience, determine their own market areas just based off geographic boundaries, whether it's an arterial road or some normal fixed boundary that you can create a market area based off that geography. But usually if you have, we'll say the town center area, and we'd like to know what the market draw is for town center, what's the average driving time for consumers, you can map out that driving time based off of a buffer from town center boundary within a certain distance of that boundary. And then you create this bubble that shows what the trade area is for a town center based off that driving distance. It's never going to be 100% accurate, but usually that's what those groups use to map out a market.
The reason I asked, because Madam Chair had mentioned, we have a lot of competition out there, particularly to the north, south, and east. And so it'd be, how do we fend off that competition and get more people to shop in the town center, I guess is what I'm trying to understand. Thank you.
And I will elaborate too, and Mr. Jacqueline can correct me if I'm wrong. Smaller rural areas that don't have a dense population or a lot of shopping centers themselves, even though they'd have maybe a 45-minute drive to a Walmart, they get lumped into that they're part of a greater region, metropolitan statistical area, so that you actually can't always break down their data specifically for that little regional community as well. But we don't have to deal with that, fortunately. City Administrator Cross, and then I've got Councilmember Bertolino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make sure I understood. Julian was referencing the document that was prepared in the past, and Julian, you were talking about there seemed to be a lot of focus on the negative. Is this document that we're talking about, is this not a marketing piece more than anything else? And if so, why would we have any negatives in there at all? I mean, talking about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats is something that's part of a strategic plan or something. But if this is something that's going out to the public, it sounded like you were talking about toning it down, but perhaps Ms. Edens, you were saying that that's a separate document, not to be part of this. So I wasn't quite sure if everybody was on the same page, because unless I'm misunderstanding the purpose of this document, I don't know why we would have any weaknesses in here at all if it's going out to the public.
I meant significant amounts of weaknesses could be a supplemental in-house document, but my thought would be is if we don't have, if we exclude all negative things and I was absorbing it as a potential developer or an investor or a government grant group, I would assume that a comprehensive study was not actually done. But Mr. Jacqueline can comment on to whether it should be in there at all. I would have concerns.
Well, again, I'm not quite sure, and maybe Julian can tell me or tell us, because I don't know what the target audience is for this work product, but I just will always want to err on the side of not, airing our dirty laundry, if you will, pointing out weaknesses. If somebody, we want to say all the good things, and if somebody wants to do some more digging and find out on their own, but why would we put it front and center? So Julian, maybe I'm not understanding. It's just my ignorance, perhaps, what the target audience is for this document, but I'm just not a fan of pointing out weaknesses whatsoever.
I totally agree. I think when the document was developed in 2016, it was all encompassing to show a complete portrayal of the city's economic development opportunities, positioning, challenges, and so on. When I began with the city now 4.5 years ago, I usually choose to use this document in a meeting as a leave behind, intentionally with potential businesses, with developers, largely to show the city's commitment to the program, to show that we as a city have spent time and money towards building this program, to show that we have this document we outsourced to a consultant that we spent the better part of a year putting together, to show these developers how times have changed and businesses why the city is now, pardon the pun, open for business. Just to show how dedicated we are to benefiting the city and growing this program. The other reason being is that within the document, it does show a lot of the city's opportunities. It shows the current amount of retail activity leaving the city, as we talked about, shopping in Chesterfield, Eureka, Ellisville, instead of shopping in Wildwood, to show that there is a leakage gap in retail activity that could be filled by a new business or new developer coming in. And lastly, identifies the types of businesses that the community identified as desirable. So when I'm meeting with bike shops, restaurants, breweries, whatever, pick your poison, I have a document in front of me that shows that 25 stakeholders identified those types of businesses as desirable. So I think in that vein, it's important to have and show. Leaving behind maybe gives them too much opportunity to dig into the details of some of the more not as favorable assets of the document. But I think definitely, as we're talking about in 2021, we can focus on the positive while we use the negative to show our growth in 5 years and how we've benefited from the creation of this program, how the city's impression and the city's business climate has definitely improved in 5 years. So maybe while talking about the negative, we can use it to spin it into a positive, if possible.
Well, that's perfect. If you're taking that negative and turning it into a positive, yes, I agree. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Well, and as I recall, Julian, when you first, I'm going to interrupt here real quickly. By having the document, when you started going out to our internal businesses, our city businesses, and we're able to share that information with them, that was very crucial information for them to understand how to improve their business within the city of Wildwood, and where the community as a whole. I don't think they took it as an offense. They took it as, oh, somebody actually spent some time to look at, how we might improve our footprint in the regional area a little bit better, or how I might compete with a competitor, either even in the city or outside the city of Wildwood. So while we may be looking at it as a marketing negative, I think our business people want to know a little bit more in depth what's working and what's not.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, I've got a 2-hour speech here I would like to start, and if you can just hold on, and I'm semi-serious, because a lot of this stuff is flooding back now from 5 years ago when we had these discussions, and I think Katie's nodding about that too. A couple of things come to mind, though. The document is, in my remembrance, was a working document. It was for the city employees, and it was for those of us on the council to have a document and a guideline for how we could move forward with economic development. As you recall, at the time, we can hide up the negatives were that the city didn't have a good relationship with our working businesses in the area. It was sometimes very strained, and we've completely turned that around. We have a wonderful environment now. But more importantly, I think we decided at that time that our business model was going to be to the world was going to be, this is what Wildwood is. This is who we are. These are our standards. These are our zoning requirements. This is our population and what we like. If you have something to offer as a business in this environment, we welcome you with open arms. Okay. And as Julian has done a million times now, we'll help you get started. We'll help you do these things. It wasn't, we want to compete with Chesterfield Valley, because that was impossible. And it's not what we wanted. Okay. We wanted businesses that adopted our new urbanism planning and so on. They wanted to have a shop in a downtown walking area. And so I think we've done a great job of focusing on that. And I don't think we should lose that and say that, well, we're missing the boat because, you know, all the businesses going to the valley. It's not. It was going there before, and it's going to continue to go there because that's where all the big box stores are. And that's not who we are. And that's not what we wanted. The thing we have going for us is we have a very wealthy population. Okay. And they love us, and the people who live here love the city, and they would love to shop, you know, if things downtown. So we've seen places like Milk and Honey thrive. Okay. Made it all the way through the pandemic, and it's coming out very well. We see the places like the Porch, and we see the, oh my God, Three French Hens that have half of my income being spent there. But there's some really thriving businesses in our city who have found that niche that fit within Wildwood. And that's what I love about us. And I think I don't want us to lose our way and say, oh, we're missing out on all this money going someplace else, because that's just not how we started out. And that's not how I think we want to continue. End of speech. I didn't take 2 hours. Okay.
We didn't appreciate the comments. Okay, okay, Councilmember Clark?
Yeah, well, just along the same lines as what Mr. Cross was saying with the positive, making it a positive. And then I hear, well, some of it does sound a bit negative. Maybe it needs to be like 2 sections. One section that's for the brand new businesses coming in, that we keep it very positive, and another section that in an insert or something for just talking about how we can improve. But I, you know, when I'm reading this, it's just not very interesting. It needs to be something with some kind of gimmick or some kind of tagline, something so that it's memorable. I could read through that and not remember anything I read because it's just really quite dry. So I think that, you know, we need to get something that's more, I don't want to say flashy, but something that's more interesting to read, something that's going to stick in their minds after they put it down. Some kind of marketing tips that somebody other than a scientist has. I don't have them.
Are you talking about the Hazel Levine document or
I'm
this document that Julian's just presented us?
No, the 2016 document.
Okay.
Oh,
So I'm saying that when we update this, some of the verbiage is just pretty dry reading.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to make it a little more interesting, a little more alive. It should be not so dry.
And I'm not one to necessarily choose to write anything that's hopefully not very dry. Within the potential drafts, as we begin to put them together, I've written a lot of reports over my many years on this planet, and I usually prefer not to make them a white paper if I can help it. Even though we're not outsourcing this to a consultant that's going to do snazzy photos and charts that maybe help us and maybe don't, I think less is more in a way. So if we can focus more on the graphic components, and I wouldn't call them bullet points necessarily, but maybe tables and graphs that tell a story without 10 pages of text, so much better for it.
Councilmember Bertolino?
yeah, Teresa, appreciate your thinking there. I think when we commissioned this consulting work, it was never the intent that the product would be something that would be a marketing tool. The product was a work document that was a guideline. In fact, to Joe's credit, it became a guide, a guideline for how we would proceed. I don't think it was ever intended to be laid in front of a potential developer and say, hey, here's what we are. Other marketing tools that Julian developed over the years is what we put before the public and before the developers. So maybe I'm not trying to be negative here, Teresa. I just think that the content and the purpose of that original document was really a quote not dry. It wasn't for public consumption per se. It was for a working document.
Can I just respond?
Yes.
Madam? Yeah, I understand that. And it met the requirements for what it was. So I understand that. I'm just saying now that we're talking about putting this out for new businesses, I think there's a different purpose in mind now. And maybe we need to change it according to that. And, Julian writes beautifully. So I'm sure that everything is going to come out looking better. I'm just saying, comparing the two of what we did that for, or what the people that were there did that for, and what we're doing it for now seems to be a whole different slightly different purpose and different target audience. So I think that it's just a comment. I don't have any ideas on how to do it.
Well, I think we've moved from junior high to high school or college.
Let's have Julian come back, and we'll worry if we need to add any fancy to it, but it will probably be okay. Let's move on after Councilmember Bertolino to just, if anybody, because I'm just trying to be conscious of the time here, if anybody has questions on the schedule, and let's go back to making sure our hands get raised, because we've skipped over Dave about 3 times. So.
Yeah, sorry, Art, just one quick, Julian, was the intent that we as the committee are going to be, this is our schedule, or are you looking at developing another committee just to do the review?
This is part of this committee's task. So we're not developing any other committees. The schedule I provided, and that's a good segue, so thank you for that. On the second page of the memo, and this was Friday, just as a constant stream of consciousness coming out in one solid fluid motion that I noticed probably yesterday didn't make a lot of sense beyond what I thought it might on Friday. So intentionally on Friday, when I put together this list as a schedule, I noticed it didn't really help much. So looking beyond that, when you scroll through past that second page, the last page is more of a chart version that includes all the same pieces, just in a hopefully a better laid out version. And that includes the full scope of work for the update, including all work provided by initial city team members, different components that will have involvement input from the committee, different pieces that are currently ongoing by the city council or impact the city council. And then once we get to that point at the very end of the process, the council's review and hopefully approval of this updated document towards the end. So speaking of the committee that's being referenced, is it this committee or is it a new committee? It's definitely this committee, but there's going to be a lot of work happening simultaneously in between each committee meeting that we have. But I believe and I hope that for each committee meeting we have for the rest of the year, maybe beyond, there will be at least some component of this update as part of that meeting.
Questions, comments, concerns before?
I would also suggest that as you look at this, if there's specific information that each council member on this committee could gather for you, any tasks off this list, since you're a department of one, perhaps we could assist in something, but that'll be your call, Julian. I'm just saying it would be, I think, many of us would be more than happy to do some of the rudimentary stuff for you as you're doing analysis, or if you have to have somebody gather specific information, just tell us where to go and we'll grab it for you.
I appreciate that, Chair Councilmember Dowell. The one thought I was having while we were discussing this is looking at the schedule. The reason that, even though it's the 2021 guide and we're already in 2021, the reason that the process is so stretched out as it is, as you can tell on the schedule, all the way into May of 22 is largely because of when certain data is expected to be released. Part of the intent of 2021 is that we will, at some point this year, have access to 2020 data, 2020 census data for the 10-year census. We're not exactly sure when those initial data sets will be released, what format they'll be available in, what geographic locations they'll be relative to. So being a little bit conservative, doing some homework, looking at the different census pages available online, trying to get a better grasp on when that data will be released, it will definitely impact the schedule. So you'll see some dates in there for September, October of census data being released to us as the city, just based off some sources I found online. So the schedule may change. That's just our initial estimate as a working document to figure out, looking at a piece of paper right now, what do we think the schedule could be? But it could certainly change between now and next May. And if any of you, for the benefit of following along in the process, have any recommendations for different ways to enhance this schedule, pulling a page from the Department of Planning and their Town Center Update Team schedule. Obviously, we as a city have done plans and updates to plans for 25 years. So if there's practices that we've done that we can use successfully for this program, so much better. Just please pass it along.
Sounds like we're ready to move on then with our third item tonight under Ready for Action, the impact of the Parks and Stormwater Sales Tax.
Thank you, Chair Edens. And I'm going to lean on Interim City Administrator Cross and Director of Planning and Parks Vunich for this one a lot, as both of these two individuals been working very hard on this item, specific to the new Parks and Stormwater Sales Tax, the financial components of it. So I will be deferring to them for hopefully a lot of the conversation. The request at the JAX at a half rate sales tax at retail and general merchandise to be imposed citywide by state statute to use on different parks and stormwater needs in the city. The question from Councilmember McCune at the last meeting was the impact that a potential parks and stormwater sales tax may have on our Wildwood businesses if the consideration makes it to a ballot and is passed. How will that impact our businesses? Within the memo I provided to the committee, my goal, and hopefully all of our goal, is to keep that conversation focused on exactly that. How will this impact our businesses? My interpretation of that is the business's reaction to a tax. How will they consider said tax? Our businesses in Wildwood currently pay a sales tax rate that is far below what many others in the region currently pay. So I wanted to be able to have this conversation as requested at that last meeting. And when Councilmember McCune did request that item, I did talk it over with Chair Edens, and she believes it was a valuable conversation for this committee to have. Within that discussion, I did provide a few items to help everybody just as part of that conversation. Given that the request was the impact on businesses, and our interpretation is how our businesses will react and respond to a potential consideration of a parks and stormwater sales tax, I really wanted to hit hard on what the tax rate situation is, both for the city of Wildwood and also our neighboring cities surrounding the city. Within the report I provided, I included in a complete copy of a report that Joe is providing to Planning and Parks Committee in about an hour and a half, 30 minutes. Wow. So Joe's providing a report in 30 minutes on the same topic, and I included a complete copy of that report with this attachment so you can all see his introduction to the topic. But within that report that Joe had provided is a copy of a current sales and use tax rate table from the Municipal League of Metro St. Louis. The point of including that was so that you all as a committee could see what each municipality in St. Louis County currently imposes as a sales tax rate within their municipality. The intent of that table shows that Wildwood currently has the lowest sales tax rate of any municipality in St. Louis County with our own local option sales tax. that's what I want you to get away from that specific table, is that Wildwood currently has the lowest sales tax rate of any municipality in St. Louis with a local option sales tax. And you can see every one of the 90 municipalities in St. Louis County on that table. With that being said, on the second page of the report, I included a comparison of Wildwood and then 6 other neighboring communities surrounding Wildwood to show how Wildwood's sales tax rate compares to our neighbors. Because largely, I think as our businesses react to a potential new sales tax, their immediate reaction will be, well, why am I charging this? What are the other cities charging? And so I included from both the Municipal League of Metro St. Louis, but also doing some digging on the Missouri Department of Revenue, what Baldwin, Chesterfield, Ellisville, Eureka, Manchester, and Pacific currently charge as their base sales tax rate. But also, and very important to our discussion, is each of those cities have their own additional sales taxes as part of a economic incentive program. So a new redevelopment project requests a new CID or TDD to help facilitate in the payment of public improvements for that project. And so for that project and within that geographic area, there is an additional sales tax within that district. So showing you on that table, the base rate for each of those other 6 cities, currently Wildwood is far below any of them, but also identifying that most of those cities and all of the cities actually have additional taxes imposed by different districts that are used within each of those communities. Using those tables, my hope and for the committee's discussion is to evaluate with that data how we as a city compare to those other cities, how our businesses may react or respond to a potential sales tax if and when it is placed on a ballot and approved. Keeping that discussion and just that impact on the businesses and not necessarily anything beyond that, but I will defer to both Steve and Joe for any further information.
I just wanted to clarify this with Mr. Cross, Mr. Vunich, and you, Mr. Jacqueline. So you are not looking for a formal motion or vote from this committee to recommend to council that this sales tax either goes forward or not? Okay. So this is really just Mr. Cross.
I was shaking my head, but I wanted to elaborate on that, if I may, Madam Chair. That was my answer, and I think that that Joe and Julian would agree. We've got a lot of people looking at this tax. Started with the Watershed Erosion Task Force, and then picked up by P&P, and we'll be talking about it in, as Julian said, about 30 minutes. So Julian's done a great job pulling this document together. It's showing, comparing us to the other municipalities and so forth. But Joe and I have done a lot of work in talking to folks regarding the recent tax, Parks and Stormwater tax that was passed recently in Creve Coeur. So I mean, this train is rolling pretty quick. The intention is to put it on the ballot in November. So they're definitely, and it's all part of just looking at all revenue sources. I mean, we had a long discussion at last night at council meeting, as you all know, with regards to, it's important to be looking at a property tax or, the way how the impact. I'm working on some financials for the mayor in terms of the impact of a potential welfare tax, et cetera. So as it relates to your committee, it's very, very important. And Julian, I think, has hit the nail on the head in terms of the impact, on the businesses. But in terms of the mechanics of pushing this thing forward, that train's already left the station and it's rolling pretty doggone fast. Joe and I are trying to figure out how the heck we're gonna, be able to make recommendations to get this on a ballot in November, because you have to back up a good 60 days or so. And have all your ducks lined up, and each day is rapidly going by. So unless Joe, feels differently, or Julian, I think we all know where we need to go with this, and we are just one of just a handful that don't have this tax. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of trying to figure out, is this going to be palatable to our residents, and how do we, there's an education part of it, of that task force. So there's a lot of moving pieces about trying to get this thing on the ballot.
Councilmember Dodwell and Councilmember Bertolino being mindful of the time.
I just had a quick question. This summary page of the tax rates for the various municipalities close to and surrounding Wildwood, is that something that can be published to the public as part of a reason for us to be able to ask for an increase in our parks tax rate? I didn't know if that was legally okay or not.
It's
I'll
okay.
jump in. I'll jump in quickly, just and intentionally, and Steve can elaborate on it. Educating is helpful and very much encouraged.
Okay,
You just need to make sure that the education is not influencing or advocating, if
okay,
that makes sense. So when we
Yeah.
put together the information, it needs to be exactly that information.
In the same manner that when we were talking about the Better Together and how the city might try to defend ourselves, Ms. Dodwell, you remember that John Young cautioned us so many times that
Mhm.
we could not be out there advocating it. We just had to give facts.
Yeah.
So I think Julian's answer was dead on in terms of we can provide information. This is great information, but we
Yeah, that's a
cannot
great
advocate.
document
Mhm.
that would be very helpful to our residents to understand where we sit with our sister cities around us, so that they understand that when they go down to Chesterfield, they're paying more taxes than what they're paying here.
Followed by Councilmember Jackson.
Mr. Bertolino again.
Yeah, sorry, two questions, guys. Number one is, well, actually three questions. Is the sales tax, did you come down to a sales tax is the only real option we have, as opposed to some sort of property, minor property assessment or something like that for everybody in Wildwood? That's one question. Second question is why 0.5%? How'd you arrive at that? And third one, I don't see anywhere here about potential revenue to be generated by this.
Julian, do you want to start with that? And then I'll
Sure.
jump in.
I will start with, let's start with the second question. The second question was why 0.5% is because that's what state statute allows us.
As a max?
Yes, the max is 0.5%.
Okay.
And then I'll kick it to you guys for the other two.
The impact, boy, I'm trying to remember the numbers in terms of what that may generate. Joe, do you remember some of the, some of the estimates that we talked about? I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden.
With the 0.5-cent sales tax imposed in Wildwood, it would generate about $1.1 to $1.2 million.
Right. And Mr. Bertolino, to answer your first question, we're looking at all, again, part of the strategic planning process in terms of, revenue enhancement and other things that we're looking at. This is just one that has been pushed, started with the WETF in terms of a parks and stormwater tax. And there's some folks that are fairly confident that they can get this on the ballot and get it passed, although it failed the last time it was on the ballot. But Creve Coeur got it done recently, and so there's a story to tell. But this does not preclude the other types of revenue generators that we're looking at. I mean, from a property tax to, and anytime any of these projects, we always look at, there's SIDS, there's NIDS, there's TDDs, there's all sorts of other things. But right now, we also have to be mindful about what else is on the ballot, not put things on an April ballot that could conflict with folks on the council running for the council seats, and et cetera. So there are other avenues. Right now, this is the one that the city, from various angles, is pursuing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment to piggyback on what Council Member Dodwell said. Just like it's important potentially to use this information for the public, I think to Council Member McCune's original request, I think it's really important that we share this with our businesses. I mean, that's really what this request, where it was born out of. And if we want to talk about impact on businesses, education is key to making sure that they understand that any negative impact, there was a rationale behind it. It wasn't just, a shot in the dark. That's all I had.
And I'll jump in real quick with the education component. And Joe can elaborate on this. The city of Creve Coeur just passed a parks and stormwater sales tax at the end of last year. So in the packet that Joe's providing to his committee in 20 minutes, there is a map that is very stark red and blue that shows you all the cities that have a parks and stormwater sales tax and pretty much the one or two that don't. And we are the one or two that don't. The only other red blob on the map that doesn't is Creve Coeur, and they just fixed that last November. So using that to say, Creve Coeur just approved a parks and stormwater sales tax in November. So R&D is the best form of flattery, research and development, or rip off and duplicate. So I think we can rip off and duplicate what Creve Coeur has done and use that information to help educate our residents and businesses as well. Along those same lines, at the last election in November, I know Brentwood successfully approved a use tax. They did a heavy amount of education to their community to inform the community what a use tax is and what it isn't. I think it was Proposition 1. It's still all over their website. They did postcards, website components, social media. And we can reuse all that information to help our residents and our businesses specifically better understand what we're discussing.
I would just caution to be careful there, Julian, that we choose to live in Wildwood. We don't choose to live in Creve Coeur. Because they did it doesn't mean we have to do it. But there's certainly value to us from it. We're making a decision. We want to do this because we know that it's beneficial to all of us. Not to be a negative Nelly or anything like that. I just, the information I think is key to success here. The more that we can push out, and I'm glad to hear that I need to make sure that I do it in a way that doesn't influence.
Yes, I know you're new, and we've certainly lived through the Better Together education, and it's very important that we do not use our positions to advocate for or against any ballot measures. So, and certainly Mr. Cross can give you more information on that as well. So if there's no further discussion, looking at the time, is there any further discussion? Nope. All right, let's quickly go on to the Economic Development Manager's report, please.
Thank you, Chair Edens. And I will mention, just back to the last topic, just briefly, that I will be participating in the Planning and Parks meeting here in 20 minutes as well to help Joe out with any items on that discussion, just representing the committee and discussing the financial impact, or more so the local impact on our businesses. So if any of you all would like to join me, feel free. It'll be a hoot.
I'll attend.
So, okay, moving on. So the monthly manager's report for the month of February, including all the past months of activities for the city's business community. We've included the regular listing of the different current happenings from our existing businesses as far as those expanding, and also some of the more recent activities from those new businesses coming in. Some of the more recent major activities, I don't know if any of you followed the different work a couple of weeks ago from both the Historic Preservation and the Architecture Review Board, but there is now a buyer under contract for a building in the old current station at Manchester Road and Pond Road, catty corner from Pond Inn. So they're moving along in their process, and we're very happy to hear that. Hopefully at this point, I'm not sure if it's happened today or will be sometime the rest of this week, but the currently available building immediately next door to Simmons Bank at 100 and Village Plaza View Drive, it has been under contract and should close any day now. So we'll be seeing a new tenant in that 4,700 square foot building very, very shortly, and I'm very happy to hear that as well. And then we've been working with a couple new groups that are interested in some of the more retail-based spaces, namely the former Llewellyn space and also Pond Inn. Nothing public, nothing too far along yet, but just some negotiations that are hopefully trending in the right direction. Included the same listing of any participation in recent events, both for Municipal League and the Chamber, the current statistics of metrics for new businesses opening, expanding, and how it impacts our total inventory. And then the continued graphs we've been including for the last few months as far as vacancy rates and unemployment rates. Now that we are in February, the December rates for unemployment were released. So you can see what the entire year of 2020 looks like from an unemployment perspective. So you can see where we started in January of 2020 versus where we finished in December of 2020. So you can see the good days and bad of COVID, of where we started, what the peaks were at the height of the initial shutdown, and where we finished off the year. Definitely very close to pre-COVID levels, if not more than pre-COVID levels. So those are hopefully very helpful for you all to understand the different activities that have taken place over the last month, and I'm happy to answer any questions on it.
Okay, going once on questions, going twice. Okay, I don't see anything. We have no items under not ready for action. Do we have any other business news and updates?
No, ma'am.
Okay, and I will say from last night as well, I know towards the end of the work session, I brought up staff input, and I do want you to know from the process before, we did, I either made it a motion or it got rolled in by consent, but we did have Julian review the list of items that we had under economic development and add the old work program and newer additions. And so I did want you to know that we ran a tight ship and had the house in order from our end and did have staff input. So thank you all for that. Please note that the next meeting time is back to our usual 6 p.m., March 23rd, 2021. With that, if no one has any announcements or requests for the next agenda, I will entertain a motion to close. Motion made by Councilmember Jaxie. Seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Thank you for joining us tonight. And will this be the same link for the next meeting? No, okay.
No, check your email for the other link.
Okay, sounds good.